Welcome into Sports Call Overtime, a new YouTube exclusive series. I'm Ryan Lavoie, joined by Brooks Childress here today. We're here to get you set for the Auburn Super Regional as the Tigers take on SEC foes, the Ole Miss Rebels. Now, Brooks, coming into this Super Regional, obviously Auburn did expect to be here, although the road was a little bit precarious after the Friday night loss against Milwaukee. Now Auburn kind of re-steadies themselves after winning 4 in a row, and they get set for an Ole Miss team that they did not see in SEC play this year. But yet the Rebels able to make it right where Auburn is here in the Super Regionals. What stands out to you about this series?
I think what stands out to me about this series is you look at this Ole Miss team, and you mentioned that Auburn didn't see them in the regular season, but there's a lot of familiar faces on the Ole Miss team that Auburn saw at the end of last year when they played them. Pitching staff, a lot of the names that you see on that pitching staff still the same. You still got hitters on that the lineup that's still the same. So it's not like you are going into this like you were this past regional where you had a UCF and a Milwaukee team. Leave out NC State because Auburn saw them last year in the regional. But you had two teams coming into Auburn last weekend that you really hadn't seen except on film and paper. NC State was the exception this last week. Ole Miss this week, you are familiar with them. You're familiar with the level of competition as well because they're an SEC squad. And you look at the series and you look, if you go down the conference slate, their conference schedule was very similar to what Auburn's was. They played Texas, they played Alabama, they played Mississippi State. You looked up and down, they played Kentucky. There was a lot of teams that you look in that conference slate, and it was very similar. And you look at the records, it was kind of similar too in that area. And so this is a very fun matchup between these two. They're two very comparable teams, but Auburn did a lot, had a lot more work in the non-conference season. They had a lot of more quality wins than Ole Miss did to get them to that number 4 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. And so I think this is going to be a really fun environment, not just because of the discounts they're doing in Plantation Park this weekend.
You're right there. Once again, doing the $1.25 hot dogs, $2.50 beers, trying to break more records that they just set on Monday night's Game 7 against Milwaukee. Again, you mentioned the similarities in schedule with Auburn and Ole Miss. Auburn, though, still amongst the leaders in the country in Quad 1 victories. I know we usually use that term for basketball, but breaking that out a little bit more these days in baseball. Let's talk pitching for the Tigers. Going to go with Andres Alvarez on Friday. We figured Jake Marciano would not be going Friday after his work on Monday. TBD on Saturday. How do you think this plays out pitching-wise this weekend for the Tigers?
I think if you're Butch Thompson, you want to try to get the pitching staff as close to right as you can. Used a lot of guys last weekend in those first game. And, obviously back into the weekend, you were able to settle things down and just use, 3 pitchers on Sunday and then 2 on Monday night. And so you were able to settle things down after that Friday game. But the fact that you had Marciano throw twice in one weekend, not something he's used to doing. Throw him out there this weekend, only if you get to that Sunday game, I think, because you give him a little bit more rest time, get him a full week of rest at that point, because those would have last pitched on that Sunday game. And so I think that you go with as close as you can to a week out. Alvarez has been moved around a couple times, so he's more used to getting that movement. Petrovic has been moved around a little bit on the weekends, but you put him on to Saturday if that gets to that. Obviously, you mentioned TBD on Saturday. If you do go with Petrovic, you get him as close to a full week's of rest as possible, and then go into that Monday. You hope that you've only used 3, maybe 4 pitchers throughout the weekend, more than likely 4, and go into that Sunday game and set yourself up for a decisive game with a lot of guys ready to pitch. The other thing is, you mentioned what Auburn's done. Ole Miss is doing the same. They announced their starter. They haven't announced a Saturday starter. So both teams are in the same boat that way in that level. But I think Auburn, one of the deepest pitching staffs in the country this year, I think they're set up very nicely.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the managers decide for Saturday and what is most important to them there, because someone is going to be fighting for their season. Yep. Someone's going to have to fight off elimination on Saturday either way. What strikes me about this Auburn pitching staff is just how even all 3 starters and all 3 main relievers are for Auburn, and that Auburn probably doesn't have a true ace, not because none of them are worthy of being aces, but they're all worthy of being aces across the country. And they all have ERAs in the low to mid threes. And then their top three relievers, all ERAs somewhere in the mid twos. And so this, to me, sets up a lot like a regular season series in the SEC. Obviously, way more stakes on the line, but same kind of format where Auburn has 6 pitchers they love. That is probably 1 or 2 more than what Ole Miss has and what most teams in the league do have. And therefore, in a perfect world, they could try to go 2 each day.
Yep.
Now, might need to throw in an Abe Chancellor or someone else, but for the most part, the majority of their innings expected to be eaten by those 6 guys. Let's also talk hitting, though, and let's talk about the huge regional Chase Fralick had. Mm-hmm. What can he possibly do? What can this Auburn lineup as a whole do as an encore performance this weekend?
That's a great question. I don't know what Chase Fralick can do because he was so good this weekend. We've talked in the show, and I've specifically mentioned how you look at some of the team leaders in the categories, and going into the regional, there was a different name in each slot. If you look at it now, it's not. Chase Fralick leads in a lot of those categories now, and so it's starting to look like other teams where you've had him step up. I think that one thing that you could do is continue your hot streak. I don't think Auburn hitting-wise needs to go out there and chase balls and try to get that big hit. There was moments in that decisive game against Milwaukee that they got out to a lead, but it felt like at times they were chasing some stuff, trying to get that big hit, trying to make the big environment feel bigger like it was on Sunday night, that late night game into Monday morning. And you can't do that. You can't go out here against an SEC pitching staff, especially, and just chase the big hit. If it comes, it comes. And that, there's a really good chance that it does come with what Chase Fralick's been able to do, what Ethan Bengaman's been able to do. There's a lot of guys up and down this lineup that had big hits. We mentioned it earlier in the week. I think it was on the Tuesday show. 6 of the 9 guys in the lineup. They didn't change the lineup at all outside of moving some guys around. 6 of the 9 guys hit over 300 in the regional last weekend. If you spread all that around again, you look for timely hits, you look for driving guys in, connecting, stringing hits together. You've got a really good shot to piece some stuff together and get a big win.
And then what a bonus that someone like Cade Ballou, even Taylor Belza down at the bottom of the lineup has given you. I expect to see those guys back in it this weekend. But again, Auburn and Ole Miss going to do it a best 2 out of 3. They're going to start Friday night, 7 p.m. inside of Plainsman Park, Saturday at 4 p.m. The Sunday game will be scheduled if it is necessary. And the good news around Plainsman Park and around the Auburn area, much better weather on tap for the weekend after many delays and stoppages this past weekend in the regional. That's Brooks Childress. I'm Ryan Lavoie. This has been a Sports Call Extra here, our new segment on YouTube. Make sure you check out Sports Call on YouTube or on our social medias at Sports Call AU. And don't forget, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., the Tiger.fm, Tiger 95.9, and the free-to-use Tiger Communications app is how you can hear our show each and every day.